Which of these stories will we be talking about tomorrow? Occupy Day 49, and there is now a second Iraq War veteran who's been critically injured in Oakland. This time not from the projectiles, but from police batons. Kayvon Sabegi lays in intensive care after what he says was an unprovoked beating by police. We'll talk to the reporter who broke the story. Mitt Romney's best week ever? New poll numbers show a near tie with the president in 12 swing states. The problem is that as details continue to drip out in the Herman Cain harassment scandal, his numbers continue to soar. Cain must have a secret weapon.
I am the Koch brothers' brother from another mother.
And Sputnik in a box.
We are proud today to prove that human can go to Mars.
6 astronauts emerged from a simulated trip to Mars, 520 days locked in a room with no sunlight and lots of electronics. Wait, is that Mars or just another weekend for the average teenager? All that and more now on Countdown.
I'm a Martian!
Good evening from New York. This is Friday, November the 4th, 368 days until the 2012 presidential election. I'm David Schuster sitting in for Keith Olbermann. We start with breaking news tonight from Occupy Oakland. A second U.S. veteran has been injured in a clash with Oakland police. According to the British newspaper The Guardian and Iraq Veterans Against the War, Kayvon Sabegi suffered a lacerated spleen in a police beating Wednesday, and he's in intensive care awaiting surgery. The fifth story in the Countdown, Wednesday's violence between police, Occupy protesters, and a small group of black-clad rioters who smashed windows and lit fires, has claimed another victim, along with 5 protesters and several police officers already reported hurt. The violence broke out after a disused building near the protesters' camp at Frank Ogawa Plaza was occupied and a barrier near the building set on fire. Police responded with tear gas, flashbang grenades, and non-lethal rounds. Some protesters fought back with rocks and bottles. Oakland police made more than 100 arrests. Iraq and Afghan war veteran Kayvon Sabegi told The Guardian he was walking away from the fighting when he ran into the Oakland PD. They lined up in front of me. I was talking to one of them saying, "Why are you doing this?" When one moved forward and hit me in the arms and legs and back with his baton. Then 3 or 4 cops tackled me and arrested me. Sabegi says he then spent 3 hours handcuffed in a police van before he was driven to jail. By that point, the veteran says he was in, quote, unbelievable pain. My stomach was really hurting. It got worse to the point where I couldn't stand up. I was on my hands and knees and crawled over to the cell door to call for help. A nurse was brought to his cell and offered Sabegi a suppository, which he rejected. Police then let Sabegi crawl to another toilet that was too clogged to use. Quote, I was vomiting and had diarrhea. I just lay there in pain for hours. Sabegi was charged with resisting arrest and remaining present at the place of a riot. His bail was posted Thursday afternoon, but he was in too much pain to leave his cell. An ambulance was called and took Sabegi to Oakland's Highland Hospital some 18 hours after the beating took place. He will have company there. Highland is the same hospital where Iraq War veteran Scott Olson was taken after he suffered a fractured skull from a police tear gas canister in an Occupy Oakland protest October the 25th. We're going to talk with Guardian reporter Adam Gabbett, who's broke the Kayvon Sabegi story, and Dottie Guy with Iraq Veterans Against the War in a moment. In Oakland, a cleanup followed Wednesday's violence while Police Chief Howard Jordan tried defending his officers to boos at a city council meeting nearby.
My officers showed great restraint in... Excuse me. Excuse me. If we're going to disagree, let us disagree respectful. And so if you want us to listen to you, then listen to the police chief.
Before that meeting ended, Oakland City Council reportedly indicated they wanted to close the Occupy camp. They have yet to vote on any proposals to shut it down. Elsewhere in the Occupy movement, Occupy Tucson agreed to close its camp peacefully and move to another location after police told them they needed the first location for a series of weekend events. And here in New York, Occupy Wall Street protesters have a busy weekend planned. They'll be taking part in an end-to-end for 99% march with Harlem residents and a rally to urge depositors to move their accounts from too big to fail banks to smaller credit unions that serve communities first. Adam Gabbett is the correspondent for the British newspaper The Guardian, who broke the story of the police attack on Iraq veteran Kayvon Sabegi. Adam, first of all, terrific reporting. Thanks for joining us. You just got back from Oakland. When is Sabegi's surgery scheduled? What do doctors hope to do?
Well, doctors hope to either insert a blood clot or a patch into his artery, he told me this morning, to stop internal bleeding from his ruptured spleen. He described himself as having a stomach full of blood when we spoke, and he was awaiting surgery. He wasn't sure when it was going to happen. Could be tonight, could be tomorrow.
He's a war veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. Did you detect his mood? What was he sort of, other than the physical pain, the emotional pain?
He was pretty outraged. He couldn't really believe how police had been so violent towards him. He had a lot of anger towards police, although it must be said, when I spoke to him, he was clearly in a lot of pain. It was quite distressing to speak to him, actually. You could hear the fatigue in his voice. As you mentioned in your intro, he's been 18 hours before he was taken to hospital. A lot of it led on a cell floor. And he was very angry with police. You know, he said, I can't believe they've done this. And that's a feeling that Scott Olson and friends of his seem to have repeated, how a veteran can go to war, go to Iraq, go to Afghanistan, come back safely, thankfully, but then suffer these injuries at the hands of police here in the USA.
You covered the general strike for The Guardian on Wednesday. You were in the area where the violence broke out on Wednesday night. Describe the scene. Describe how it happened.
Protesters occupied a building, a disused building, and that was taken. I'm not sure how they gained access, but they did, and that was taken peacefully, and people were gathered in there. And this was about 11 p.m. There was quite a carnival atmosphere on the street. Music was playing. Rihanna at one point seemed to be a particular favourite. And there was really quite a carnival mood. But then every so often, waves swept through the crowd, suggesting police were on their way. And at this, I walked down to Telegraph, walked east from this building, which was on 16th Street. And there, protesters had created a barrier to prevent anyone getting into the street. And I was hanging around there, and it became clear that police were massing, at least 200 police officers further up the street to the north. And at this, some protesters set fire to the barricade, creating quite sort of iconic scenes, but also scary scenes, and I think a lot of people got quite intimidated just by the fire's presence. That obviously, police felt they had to act quicker, the fire was getting quite out of control. So they pushed down, and people wouldn't move back as quickly as they wanted. And that was when they fired tear gas and what I believe to be flashbang grenades. And I also spoke to one girl who'd been hit by rubber bullets.
It sounds like Sabegi was hit with the police baton by perhaps several. Did you see any of that sort of activities with the police actually chasing people or people who were walking away from the scene?
I couldn't see them chasing people. I did see people struck with batons. The police massed in a line across Broadway, which was just to the north of where this was occurring. And they moved forward in a line using their batons like this in a kind of trudging motion. And anyone who was in the way was struck by the baton. And some of the people didn't want to give ground. They were hit by batons. I saw one person fall to the ground and be carried away. And then the police that would then get to a certain point, stop, then move forward again. It took them about 2 sort of movements like that to reclaim the area, the immediate area. But from what I understand, Kayvon was injured further west from this. He was walking away from all the violence. He wasn't stood trying to prevent police from approaching. He said he was walking away along 14th Street, and he came into an isolated group of officers when he suffered his injuries.
Which is so ironic, because you were just pointing out a minute ago that, off-air, that the Iraq and Afghan war veterans have been sort of at the front of the march, in part because they're a little bit braver and perhaps reassuring others that this is going to be peaceful.
That's correct. On the march to the port of Oakland, which was a very well-organised protest, there must have been thousands, up to 10,000, different estimates, estimate different numbers. But we walked from the plaza, the Frank H. Ogoa Plaza, where the Occupy Oakland protest is based, and headed down to the port, which is, I mean, in total it was about a 3-mile walk. And Iraq veterans were at the front of the march, and they were very keen to keep the Iraq veterans in front of the sort of bulk of protesters. And they were used as a sort of, like you're right, as a kind of calming presence. And also, these people have been to war, they're not intimidated, but also they won't overreact and, you know, throw things, stuff like that.
What's been the mood since the reporting has gotten out that yet another Iraq war veteran is facing serious injuries at the hands of U.S. police?
I think it's disbelief. I think the first time people were very emotional to hear of Scott Olson's injuries, especially when video came out which shown him not being a provocateur in any way. He was just stood calmly. And since then, I've spoken to people from the Iraq Veterans Against the War movement who, the feeling has been very much, I can't believe they've done it again. Kayvan, from speaking to him, and I believe him, he sounds a very honest guy, he sounded very hurt, but he said he was peaceful, he had his arms folded, he was trying to talk to officers when someone came forward and started hitting him with a baton. It's just disbelief and also disgust that this can have happened again.
Adam Gibbett, correspondent with the British Guardian, the newspaper, some incredible reporting, and thanks so much for coming on Countdown tonight and sharing with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.